Yeah, we're live. I am here a full 3 minutes early. Hopefully all you guys are here, had a good time, had a good weekend. We're all getting ready for, I guess, next weekend, 4th of July, which is awesome. So everybody be safe and sane when you're doing that. I do love me some fireworks, but I don't think it's, I think here it's not legal, but we'll have to go somewhere else to maybe light off some fireworks or something, or go watch a fireworks show, because that's always a big part of it. I do love that. Tonight we're going to talk about I'm working on a video right now, and I've made lots and lots of mistakes on it, but it has to go up because I can't redo the whole thing. I'm doing a video on a 0304 Cobra crate motor that I was lucky enough to have the guys from Ford Racing supply me way back in the day. This was back actually in 04, so it happened a long time ago. And it was more than likely, this was probably my favorite crate motor ever. I don't think I've been as excited about running a motor as I was about running this one, for a number of reasons. One, it was new and it was fresh, and it was a big jump up in power from what the naturally aspirated stuff was doing. And it was a big jump up in power compared to what the Chevy guys had been doing. And they had kind of been leading the way with their stuff. Their motors were always bigger than the 4.6 stuff. Even the Cobras, though they made a fairly good peak power, the small displacement limited torque production on the Cobra stuff. So when you compare a 350-inch or a 345-inch LT1 or an LS1 compared to the 4.6 stuff, it just really couldn't compete. But then when they introduced the Terminator motor in 03 and 04, and then they underrated it at 390 horsepower, which I'm going to say a different number several times, multiple times in this video. So you guys can all make comments on it. So it will be awesome. But when they stepped up to this motor, it was a big jump up in power. So it was, we had seen stuff before where they went from on the 2-valve stuff, they went from the non-PI stuff, which ended up being in the highest configuration in the 98 stuff was like 225. And they went up to 240 on the PI stuff. And that's a fairly good gain. And then it stepped up to 300 or 305 for the 4-valve stuff. But then they jumped way up in the 03 Cobra stuff. And the thing that made the jump even greater than the rated power output change was that the fact that it sure looks like they underrated that motor. I mean, we ran one in this video you guys will get to see. I took one out of the crate, which is just a brand new 03, 04 Cobra crate motor that came off the assembly line that they were selling, and we put it on the dyno, and I ran it with the stock exhaust manifolds. We ran 2.5-inch exhaust. I ran the accessory drive the way that they sent it. We didn't put an electric water pump on it. We ran it. We even ran the factory tune. I went to the guys at Kenny Bell so they could tell me what the factory tune is actually in a car, and we ran that tune. We ran that air fuel and that timing on this motor on the engine dyno to see what it would do in stock trim. Now, I did not have the factory air intake on it, and they did not have the cats and exhaust all the way back because we couldn't configure that the way that the dyno was, unfortunately. But we get a fairly good idea, and the difference in power is so dramatic that the thing was definitely underrated. By how much, you guys can speculate all of that stuff. But then obviously I didn't stop there. And the one thing I talk about in the video, and only the guys that are, my live feed guys here get to get a preview of this and get a sneak peek. One of the things I talked about is I do like these factory forced induction motors. Whether I like the 03 Cobra motor, also the Shelby stuff, and the Chevy stuff too, the LT4 and the LT5 stuff, any of the factory turbo or supercharged stuff, I like what it is when it's stock, like this 0304 Cobra motor, but I also like how much potential they have. Any of the factory stuff is like overbuilt, so they leave a lot of potential there for you. Now with the 03 and 04 Cobra motor, they're limiting you kind of by the blower size. So an M112 supercharger, it's not going to be able to make 1,000,000 horsepower. It's not going to be able to make 1,000 horsepower. It's not going to be anywhere near that. But the rest of the motor can. So if you can get rid of that blower or blow through that blower with a couple of turbos and do a compound thing, which is something that we did. But if you do the things like that we do to the junkyard LS stuff, if you put cams in it, and you could port the heads, although they flow fairly well even stock, put an intake manifold on it and run turbos on it, 4-digit power stuff is not hard at all with those motors. I think when we ran cams in the thing, it was 425 or so, just putting cams in it, and it was still low compression. It's an 8.5 to 1 motor. It has Manley rods in it. It has a factory forged crank in it, the 8-bolt crank, and then 8.5 to 1 pistons. And then those 03 Cobra heads actually flow fairly well. So just putting cams in it did a lot to it. And then when you start there and you just start multiplying the boost, you see that you get some fairly big power numbers. Now, we use fairly small turbos when we did the 1,000 horsepower stuff. I think that they were 57 mil. I can't remember if they were the upgrade turbos. They were either 46s or 57 millimeters. But if we put even bigger turbos on there, you could make a ton of power because the motor would take it. And I didn't even ever check the ring gap on that motor. I assumed that because it was boosted, that Ford would have done things to make sure that it would be able to run. Because there could be guys that were foolish like me that would go out and run it sustained at the Silver State or something. So you want to make sure that you have enough ring gap. But I never checked it. If we were going to turn it all the way up, I guess past 1,000, because that's about where we got when we were doing the turbo stuff, when I was doing all the testing on it, that I probably should have done that back in the day, but sometimes you don't. But I really like that motor, and so I'm excited about doing that video. I have some other stuff up on that. We did a Kenny Bell upgrade. We ran a Vortec on it and a Paxton. And we ran nitrous. I mean, we ran all kinds of stuff on that motor, and that's also one of the things that I liked about this crate motor is as soon as we put it on, I was able to run, like 5 or 10, closer to 10 tests. So we ran a throttle body upgrade. We ran headers. We ran a couple of different blower pulleys, a couple of different crank pulleys. We changed the tune. And then after that, we tried camshafts. We tried a Kenny Bell blower and a Vortec and turbos and different cylinder heads, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was that motor was used. I should go back and now and count the number of tests and stories and things like that I did with that motor. It was a lot, and it's still, it was still alive and impressive, and that's how they are. That's a good little crate motor. I think the only other factory crate motor that I got was a factory LS2, and we did a lot of testing with that for my LS book. But and that motor, let's see, that LS2 did not make as much. Did not make as much as the factory 03 Cobra motor did, but it was close. And an LS3, a naturally aspirated LS3, makes as much power as that 03 Cobra. I'd like to overlay those curves and see how they are down low, but in terms of peak power, it's very, very comparable between that naturally aspirated LS3, which came obviously later than the 03 Cobra motor did, but that NA motor makes as much as the factory supercharged motor did. Now, obviously, it's fairly easy to get to way beyond those power levels with the supercharged stuff. But and then lots of different blower upgrades for those Magnuson stuff and Whipple stuff, and Kenny Bell and Vortec had their thing where everybody wanted to incorporate the factory air to water intercooler. So they made just a plenum that bolted on top and retained the factory intercooler. And we tested that compared to the long runner 2000 or 2001 standard Cobra manifold. Lots and lots of good stuff. That's why I really like that motor. So that's what I'm working on. And I'm about halfway through with the edit on that. 12.5 to 1 compressor. So let's see what you guys are. Cobras are slow junk. Not an 0304 Cobra wasn't slow. It's like make 850 wheel horsepower on a stock bottom end. Yeah, that's pretty simple. We were making so 850 wheel horsepower. That'd be like 950. James, I heard that the Ford rated the Terminator at 390 horsepower at the crank, but it made that at the wheels. It did. Most of them were pretty close to that. A 79 Camaro with a 5-liter. I've seen the weirdest one I've seen is and I saw an El Camino and a Camaro like that had a tri-power FE in it. They both did. Twin screw versus turbo is much better than roots or centrifugal versus turbo. A twin screw versus a turbo has the same problem. It takes a lot to drive them. Yeah, Paul, the twin turbo kit that the HP guys did, pretty easy to make really big power. They're the guys that we did the compound deal where they had their twin turbo setup blowing through the factory Eaton supercharger. Yeah, the Mustang farmers went crazy when they first saw the Terminator because, let's face it, even the previous Cobra stuff, the naturally aspirated stuff, was just kind of underwhelming. You could get them to make reasonable power out at the top, but they just did not have any torque. And then once they added boost to it, man, they really loved having torque. What happened to frightening the lightning-powered Fox? Frightening. I thought that the guys from Muscle Mustangs did that. Can you turbo and keep long tube headers? Yes, you can. So let's see what we got going on down here. Is the M122 Cadillac blower legitimately more capable than the M112? I think from a displacement standpoint, it certainly is. How big of a difference do engine 5/8 primary headers compare to 2 1/8 with turbos? Is there a big difference? Probably not. Are you talking about feeding the turbo? Probably not very much, unless that's a big block. John Wilson, I don't think you need to upgrade your coils. We have coils that last a long, long time, and we run them. When I get the motors from the wrecking yard, we run the factory coils, and they work for a long time. Montreal's in the house. I had a buddy. Everybody has a buddy. My brother's sister's cousin's uncles knew a guy that knew a guy. What's your opinion on the new Ford 7.3s? I've never run one, but they look like they make pretty decent power. I like superchargers. I had a Vortec 302 HO for the Fox. Welcome to the club. But when my friend got his 03 Terminator, knew it made a huge impression. But now that I'm older, the adjustability of the turbo and not dealing with belts. We did run into belt slippage issues when I was doing this testing. So, Robert, you work at the auction and you've got a Cobra motor with a Kenny Bell on it. Does header size matter on turbo cars? From small to primary is too large to the primary. You need to be less concerned about header primary diameter on a turbo motor. If you take a look at what people do, they do log manifolds, they do factory exhaust manifolds, all of that stuff, and the turbo still does wonderful things. Richard, I know you mentioned those TFS 175 heads before. Given that they flow pretty well for their size, you think it would be a waste of time on a 383 TPI? No, I think they would work fine on a tune port motor. I'm running the first. That will help. Richard, have you seen the porting methods utilized on Faster Problems channel? No, but I think he just did a head for Calvin though. Your dyno engine seemed to last a long time, longer than some motors. I have a few drag races and burnout contests. We say all those dyno pulls aren't as hard on the motor. Is that? I don't know. I know we run it cold. It gets cold air. It has fairly cold water. We make sure that everything is safe while we're doing it. We're pretty good at tuning it to make sure that it doesn't break. And so a dyno run lasts longer than a quarter-mile run does typically, because if we run 300 RPM per second and we're running for 3,000 RPM, that's 10 seconds. Normally we run more than that. We'd run from 3,000 to 6,500 or something like that. So it might be a little bit longer than that. But, you know, the thing is that it's only accelerating through the RPM range once. It's not doing it a bunch of times through gears. It's not accelerating nearly as quickly as it does when you're going through the gears on an acceleration run. We don't have to worry about over revving. We don't have to worry about missing shifts. We don't have to worry about improper tuning, usually. Tampa's in the house. Spool time with the narrow runners and an exhaust header will be affected in a turbo setup. That's only a maybe. You don't know that for sure because it doesn't always do that. Sometimes the limiting factor in what happens is simply the size of the opening in the hot side of the turbo. So sometimes that does something and sometimes it doesn't. Celine S351, especially the supercharged one, was really good. So, Michael, you blew third gear on your T56. We used to break blocker rings in the T56s. Is it fair to compare torque numbers between rotaries and piston engines? How would you personally measure the 13B displacement? Is it 1.3 or 2.6? I don't really care about that. I don't care about comparing it to another motor, whether it's better or worse or whatever. That doesn't matter. All you're trying to do is if you have a rotary and you have a 100 horsepower rotary, then you want a 200 horsepower one. And then if you have a 2, you want a 3 and so on. So just make it better than that. You don't have to say, well, this is the equivalent of that. I remember guys going through that back when Mazda was running GTU with those, and everybody was saying that they were cheating because it's really a 2-stroke motor and it should have this kind of equivalency. And the Mazda guys did their homework and put together a really good winning package that dominated that class for a long time. So I don't really get involved in that. Richard, I'm running a 351 Windsor, 9-to-1 compression, 9.1, and a customized on-3 turbo kit. Would you suggest an 86 AR housing or a 96 housing for a street? Looking for what is the power output of the 351 Windsor? Like, what heads do you have and what camshaft do you have? Do you have any idea what the NA power output is? That's kind of determine what housing you should want to use. Ross, I had Texas Speed do my porting on my heads or 799s. I milled them 30 on an L33 flat top piston 5.3. Any valve to piston clearance? I don't know what camshaft you're talking about. Not on a stock cam or any kind of reasonable cam. 30,000s isn't really very much. I'm building a Texid 464 valve using a forged rotating assembly. Comp cams you used in your 4V test, running 9.3. I know you used 8.5. Is 9.3 too much? No, 9.3 would be much better. I mean, I would like that motor to be 10-to-1 actually. I have a Vortec on my 2300 Mustang. So is it a 2.3 1993 model? Mark, I wasn't able to get a hold of Jeremy for the ported head. I think his porting guy left. So I don't think he's there anymore. So I don't think that that's going to be an avenue. I need somebody else that's going to be able to do it. Confused. Your stock block on your small block will be fine. And 9-to-1 would be good. How much horsepower will a 5.4 liter 3-valve make with upgraded rotating assembly? The rotating assembly might not do anything for you other than give you the strength. I don't know what compression you're changing to. MMR timing stuff, I don't know what that is unless it's just locked timing and you're not having the variable cam stuff. Are you putting cams in it and 10 pounds of boost? If I remember right, those motors made about 350 horsepower the way that we run them NA. So if you multiply that out, we ran, I think we did run turbos on those. I have to go back and look and see what kind of boost we ran. But that's going to be, if you multiply 350 times 1.68, you'll have a pretty good idea of what that is. And we can do that real quickly so I can tell you. So that's around 580 horsepower, so 588. How far would you push an aluminum 5.4 GT500 motor? What have you seen in their horsepower limits? I think guys are making way into the mid 4-digit stuff with those. So, Victor, you've seen a difference on the engine dyno going from a 3-inch collector to a 2.25-inch collector, and up pipes on an LS with a single Borg Warner, and you went from a 3-inch Y pipe to a 2.25, and also a 3-inch collector to a 2.25, and you changed the spool rate on your S480. So Brian, 398 Gen 3 Hemi, forged internals 10.5 to 1, E85 TSP stage 2 cam, looking for 1200 horsepower, twin GT45s or single S480. Both of those are going to be getting near. I think that the twin GT45s might do a little bit more. Twin max being GT35s. I don't think the 35s are going to get you. I mean, if they would have their tongue hanging out at 1200, I think you'd be better off with 45s on that. Single turbo or 04 Terminator made 700 wheel. It held up for as long as you can remember. That should be a fairly easy number for that motor. Centrifugal down by the crank where the belt can be made short. Yeah, you can do that. You would have less chance of slippage because you're going to have less like sine wave action on the belt, and the trying to minimize the amount of unsupported belt, like with no tensioner or idler, is a good idea on those. And obviously a cog belt is the ultimate thing. Obviously guys are using chains and direct drives and stuff, but if you run a cog, you usually don't have to worry about that. But make sure you have a blow off valve. How much horsepower can a 351 Windsor block handle? We've done 4-digit stuff with it. Any point in splayed mains if running NA? No. Freiberger's disgusting 408 already lost a bearing. Those guys do break a lot of stuff. Turbo rotaries are awesome. My dad took a 72 Torino, built 351 Cleveland out, and turned into a Restamond with a 2011 GT500 crate motor. That's a good motor. As a matter of fact, the other thing I was looking into today, was comparing. I'd like to build a reproduction of 2 motors. One of them is going to be fairly straightforward. One of them, I'm going to do a stage 1 Buick 455. So I can, from what I have, I can build that motor. That's not going to be too hard. I just need to have it be the right compression, the right camshaft, and the right valve size. All of that is fairly easy. The other one I want to do is going to be more difficult, and I'm reaching out. So if you guys know of anybody, please let me know. I'm trying to do a 429 Super Cobra jet. So, and it doesn't have to, I don't have to use the 4-bolt block, and I can use the a cast crank and the rods that I have. I just need to put the right pistons in it, which we can do. We can get those. I think that there are reproductions available. What I need is a set of Cobra Jet heads. So somebody out there, let me know if you have any or have access to any. Even if I could just borrow them, I need a set of Cobra Jet heads that I can make into Super Cobra Jet heads. And then I have found a couple of Super Cobra Jet intake manifolds, because the Super Cobra Jet manifold is different than the Cobra Jet manifold, because on the Cobra Jet manifold, they use a different carburetor. They switched over to a Holley on the Super Cobra Jet. So it's still a cast iron, super heavy, terrible manifold, but it's flanged, and the openings are for a Holley. So I think I can get a hold of that. And obviously it needs the solid lifter cam, and the lifters, or none of that's a problem. The spring's not a problem. The guide plates and studs and all that, and the rockers, none of that are a problem. The hard things on that are the heads. I sent a message over to John Causey to see if he had any laying around, or if he knew of anybody, and he said that he didn't. So I'm looking around. So if somebody has Cobra Jet or Super Cobra Jet heads, I'd like to do a 429, and I'd kind of like to compare the 429 versus the Stage 1 455. Do you need to change the cam bearings when you do a cam swap? No. Cosworth V10 can compete with the rotary. I have heard those, and the Judd stuff too. I was around when they were running the Ferrari 12 cylinders in the, what is it, the SP 333 or something. And then they were running the Judd V10s, and that was the same time that Panos was running those motors, and those things were ungodly loud. Those things were you had to wear your earpiece. They looked like the Batmobile, but they were awesome and they were fast. But the Judd V10 sounded like race motors, and so did the Ferrari 12 cylinders. The Sniper intake is gone. Made a live stream, yay! Been porting for 15 years now, and I know what's happening. The cam is a BTR stage 2. Yeah, 212, 218 is not going to be a problem with anything. You'll get a changing compression from milling at 30. Not a ton, but some. Yes, the older F1 cars sound good at 18,000 RPM. Samtech, I'm familiar with those guys. Let me ask Steve P. Shipping would be $200. What's your take on Trick Flow Stage 2 cam compared to Anderson? And I don't think you'd see very much difference between those two. For Ford V10, yes, that would be good. For an NA motor, I don't think you'd ever run into a difference between a 2-bolt and a 4-bolt block, unless you're trying to build like a cup motor. Then it would be a good idea. For any kind of a street motor, I don't think that's an issue. So you change collectors and pipes to each scroll. So did you have a twin scroll turbo and twin scrolls before you changed the diameter, or did you change also to a twin scroll? I had an X cam in my 306 with TFS heads. Richard, how many cam swaps have you guessed? Would you guess that you've done? I think I've done all of them. How many cam swaps resulted in failures like flat lobes? Have you ever had a roller type? I've never had a roller type brake. The only failure that I can ever remember, like on an LS, was I actually did have a cam bearing go out on a block when I was running a series of camshafts. I was running a bunch of stock factory camshafts on this block. I have no idea how. I have no idea how many miles the block had on it because it was a junkyard one, and we didn't look. And I also don't know what kind of condition the cam bearings were in, and I also don't know what the size of the journals were compared to the other cams. Like, I didn't ever mic them to find out if one was, a thou bigger, 2 thou bigger. I didn't ever do that. We were just sliding cams in and testing them. And I put an LS6 cam in, and it grabbed the bearing and spun the bearing, and I couldn't get the cam out. So that's when I had to do a block swap. So I had to take all the internals, the crank rods and pistons and all of that stuff, and put it in another block because I wanted all that stuff to be the same. And then I reran the motor after the block swap with the stock cam again to re-verify that I was making the same power as the other motor was so that I could continue with the test. Otherwise, I was going to have to start all over and run all of the cams. I think I'd already done 8 cams by then. Rerun all of those cams again, and that's not fun. But I've never had lobes go flat. I have had lobes go flat, not from a cam swap, but I've had lobes go flat when the lifter rotates in a lifter tray that gets bad. If the lifter trays get old, they get sloppy, and then the lifter can move around. And when the lifter rotates and the roller's not going the right direction, it will wear the cam out. Is it worth rebuilding my 5.44 valve or replacing with a 4.6 aluminum 4B? The 5.4 is going to make a lot more torque than the 4.6 does. The Typhoons were port injected, yes. The big 455 has the most torque of all big blocks except for the Cadillac. Is going lower compression helping or hurting turbocharged power with high boost? It hurts power. Going less compression will result in less power. Are there any drawbacks to using a cog belt for a supercharger? Yes, it doesn't have slip. And sometimes on D-cell, you actually want that. You have to make sure that you have a blow-off valve because accelerating the blower and then decelerating it on a hard lift throttle can kind of become hard with cog belt stuff. So you want to make sure that you have the blow-off valve. To turn it into a Super Cobra jet, all you need is a couple of stickers. That's right. How about boost on an IHC 345 motor? Well, boost helps everything, right? Any testing on the Pro LS turbo cams? I've run 3 or 4 of the Pro LS Summit cams, and they all worked well. No head gaskets on the Ferrari engines. The 455 is definitely going to make more torque than the 429. Yes, Ford 300 is on the list. I can't run Police Interceptor heads because they're not the same. They have a different chamber. Yeah, and the 429s are nice, except that they don't have a Cobra jet and a Super Cobra jet have really big ports on them. What's the most horsepower you've seen out of a 289 Ford? It depends on how modified it is. I've seen some Trans Am stuff that makes pretty good power. A 455 shootout would be cool with an Oldsmobile and a Buick and a Pontiac, the BOP stuff. Where do you get the 3-bolt flanges for the LS turbo pipes you have made? You get them from the wrecking yard. When we get our motors from the wrecking yard with the stock exhaust manifolds, they come in with big hydraulic scissors and they just pinch off the exhaust. They get rid of the cats. They leave a section of that pipe there. And when they leave a section of that pipe there, they also leave the flange there. So all we have to do is weld on from that pipe and make our Y pipe off of that. It's really good. And that's the way that most of the wrecking yards that I've been to are like that. But those flanges are also available. The guys at LJMS have those. The 289s were getting spun super high. Yeah, they were. The problem is the 289 heads, like any of the factory stuff, is terrible. They're awful. They don't flow very well. Can you post the casting numbers to the 429 heads that you need? I think that they are I thought that I wrote that down. A DOOR, does that make sense? I'll have to take a look again. But it has to be Cobra Jet or Super Cobra Jet, basically. Let's see what we got going on down here at the bottom. I got to catch up. Dan, thank you. I'm building a 96 Impala SS383 forged assembly AFR head single turbo. Not sure the best way to tune. Are you going to still keep the factory ECU on that? Because if you are, that's going to be a little bit difficult. But that's going to be a good combination. You should be able to make a lot of power with that. I don't know anything about the TCI 6X Auto Trans. I've never run any of them. Richard, have you ever dynoed a 389 Pontiac? I need to rebuild one for a 66 GTO. My uncle's been sitting for 24 years. I haven't. I would like to run more Pontiacs. I was wanting to do a 455. I got to be there when West-Tech was running one, so I did a video on that. And I was hoping to do the 347 that I have if I can get an adapter or something for the bell housing to run that, because it came with a tri-power, and I was just going to, mine didn't. It was a 2-barrel truck motor, but I was going to put a tri-power on it and make it the tri-power version. Did you hear about the new Alpha Dan big block 7.5 liter 4-cylinder? I did. I saw that. That looked cool. Boost helps everything. Could you run a 598 big block with 13-to-1 on 92 pump gas? Yeah, you could if you have to have a lot of camshaft in it. I'm going to do a new name change tonight. The Nomadic Wrencher will be my name. Nice. Let's see. I'm trying to read back some of these. Do you run 29 degrees of timing for LS motors from 3,500 to 6,500 when you dyno test, or do you gradually add more as RPM increase? What we do is I start out at like 22 or 23, and then I start adding timing, and if it likes it, I keep that timing. And if it doesn't add any power, then we'll stop. A lot of times at lower RPMs, it could be lower than that. But if you think about most guys running a distributor on a motor, even an LS, if they were running a distributor, it would be all in by 3,500 RPM. So they're running a consistent amount. You can do that. If it doesn't add any power, I don't like doing that, because I think that just brings it closer to detonation. So we normally have a curve, and it'll usually be 29 after the torque peak. Texted blocks, light ported heads, comp cam stage 2, mod 2K 10.2 compression, Kenny Bell 2.8 Mammoth, made 690 on pump 93 with only 14 pounds of boost. 18 degrees of timing. As long as it's not detonating. Ross, 5.3 cold air, TVSS, ported 799s, ported milled, long tubes, catless pipe, stage 2, truck cam, 93, goal is 400 wheel horsepower. I doubt that. I doubt it will get there. Not with an automatic. If that's a manual, you might get closer. Help me convince Holdner to do a max rev video. That won't happen. I'm not interested in running 9 or 10,000 RPM because nobody does it. 99% of the people out there build boosted motors, especially LS motors, but almost all of these, the number of people that run that kind of RPM is like this much. And there's lots of good guys that build dedicated race motors that cater to those guys. And I'm not that guy. Building a 69 Camaro, I'm torn between an LS5 383 and the 6-liter 408. Which one do you say give you more bang for the buck? Well, if you're on a budget, the 5.3 is a better way to go. The 6-liter is going to make more power, and it would be my first choice. But either one of them, you just have to figure out what your budget is, and then what is your desired power output. Like if you want to make 500 horsepower, just do the 383. If you want to make 600 NA, then I would start looking at the 408. But you've never built any comp eliminator engines? I haven't. I built Bonneville motors and touring car motors, but not comp eliminator stuff. Took me the whole video to realize what a PI and a non-PI head was. So you're not a Ford guy. And not even just a Ford guy, you're not a 2-valve Ford guy, because that's a whole different thing. A Coyote does run a pretty good RPM. I would say you'd be a lot closer to 350 wheel horsepower than you would be to 400. Tom, family comes first, man. Solid rollers, balance, dual spring, upgraded rockers, easy 8500 LS, NA 600 horsepower. Go, man. That's all you. Make it happen. PI is power improved. And that's the other thing that I won't do, that I don't like. I'm not going to run an LS motor with solid rollers either, again, because there's about 3 guys in the world doing that, and they have other people that can help them with that. So what RPM do your Bonneville engines run? Well, it's a B series Honda, so it did run 8,000. It ran, I never went over 8,700, which is not very much for a B16. Well, it wasn't a B16. It was actually a B20-ish, so it was slightly under 2 liters. But I never revved it very high. That's the reason that it lasts and set lots and lots of records and continued to run, because we didn't ever hurt it. Thoughts on the 3-valve engine? I've tested a lot of them. I've run blowers on them, nitrous on them, turbos on them, all kinds of stuff. They were a big step up over the 2-valve, that's for sure. What does Brian Tooley think about your thoughts on specific cams? When I say all cams are turbo cams, he just laughs. He knows what he's seen all the testing. He knows what the data is. He likes it. And I'm not saying you can't run turbo cams and you can't run nitrous cams or you can't run blower cams. You can, and they're there. By saying that, I'm saying that if you have a cam in your car and you want to run nitrous on it, you can. You don't have to change the cam. Or if you want to run a turbo on it, you can. You don't have to change the cam or blower or whatever. They will all work. Richard, when you have twins with 3-pound springs, is the minimum boost you run 3 pounds? It's going to be 3. Thoughts on LS6 intake with ported throttle body, ported 243 heads with dual 660 springs. It's a Gen 3 5.3, Gen 4 rod and ATI damper. Hoping for 7,000. You can easily run that to 7,000. You can run a motor, just pull it out of the junkyard, and it will run to 7,000 RPM. A 4G63 engine. I do like those. I haven't run one of those on the engine dyno though. The Mad Mod, the 9-to-1 compression is not going to be ideal for your 4-valve combination, but it you know, you need boost. I'm impressed with the EcoBoost stuff. We've run a couple of those on the chassis dyno, and they make really good power and really good torque. Richard, what's your thoughts on getting folks here in chat to subscribe to David? You guys should all take a look at David's stuff. He's a sharp guy. So if you like porting and you like tech stuff, he's very tech savvy. I have a 460 with 200,000 out of the Lincoln. You can have it for the dyno. I've run a couple of 460s. Obviously, I'll never turn down a free motor. I'm sure that it's across the United States, though, right? I'm out back to cleaning out the fuel system. Uh-oh. Is that because you ran methanol on it? If you build a new Coyote, no need for cams unless you want over 1,200 horsepower. A Coyote, any Coyote, will make more power with good cams in it. It's just that they have decent cams in them already, and you can make a lot of power with boost. A 3-valve will respond very well to nitrous, to a blower, or to boost from a turbo. At what point do you get diminishing returns, adding duration? It depends on the combination. Six-liter everyday driver pickup. I would pick a stage 2. The GT40 heads will be a lot better than any of the factory 289 heads. I think that the chamber will be a little bit bigger, though. I've got a buddy whose LS revs past 9,000 all day, every day, just daily, just perfect, reliable, gets 50 miles to the gallon, too, as a matter of fact. Let's see, here we go. Somebody had a Bonneville question here. At Bonneville, does it take more horsepower to go fast or more RPM? Bonneville requires horsepower. So at Bonneville, what a lot of drag racers especially have a hard time contemplating is that, like, a lot of guys want to, you always want to make your car light so it accelerates well. None of that matters at Bonneville. The Bonneville thing for top speed is it's horsepower versus aerodynamic drag. So weight is almost inconsequential. As a matter of fact, most people add a ton of weight to their car, especially rear-wheel drive cars. They put a ton of weight in the back to get them to allow them to put power down. In a front-wheel drive car like in the Honda, it was not as much of a problem because we have the engine and trans sitting over the drive wheels. In my case, it was only one drive wheel because I had an open diff. But you need to make a given amount of power relative to the speed of the car, relative to the aerodynamics. And if you have more power and it can overcome that, then you can go faster. Yes, David Vizart, he's the man. Your thoughts on boost with high compression? You can make that work. You just have to have charge cooling, and you have to have the right timing and the right octane. JVV, thank you very much. Did you have a question? Somebody else who just dropped? Demon Tech, what's going on? You got a question? Comment? Do you want to make fun of somebody? Whatever, just tell me. We'll make it happen. Safe amount of boost for a stock trans and block on a 3V. I don't know about the trans. I don't know how much they'll take. How about an EB3 Honda motor, 1200 from a 79 Civic? I like those old Civics. I'd like to have an even earlier one than that. I want to have the little tiny one. We made an easy 925 horsepower on our Whipple-powered 16 pounds of boost Coyote. I could see how that would be possible. 925 flywheel horsepower, I'm sure. Is it true that the first gen Coyote has weak rods? They're weaker. I mean, we've made quite a bit of power with the first gen, and we've revved it to 8,500. So, see, there you go. Where's my Flexall? Where's my rev guy? We rev Coyotes high. When I say we, I mean me. But I was scared, though. For blow-through on C16, generally what boost pressure do you want the front and rear power valves, boost reference power valves to open? There's no universal thing there. You have to, it's the amount of airflow versus the carb size and the jetting and the needs of the motor, which are going to change dramatically, because if you're running the same amount of boost on a 302 with that carburetor versus running it on a 454 or a 555 or something else, or a Coyote, the needs are going to change, and where you activate that is going to change. Are you going to do some propane performance? I might try to run just a naturally aspirated motor on propane, only because I never have, but not. I probably won't run any boosted stuff. Newcomer broke the 4-liter Jeep record. People say that like there was the people from Guinness were there to establish the Guinness Book of World Records. What is that record? All that they mentioned was the fact that the most power we'd ever heard of was somebody else that did something else. I'm not taking anything away from what they did. That was awesome. They made power. I just don't know what the established records are. Would there be any benefit to injecting the E85 like most people do methanol before the injectors? Yeah, you could get charge cooling from that. Are you going to be at Speed Week? I don't think so. The Jeep 4-liter record was only 150 horsepower. Wow, shots fired on Jeep. Diesel mechanic, I got a 12-to-1 compression 355 that loves propane. See, I've never even run one. I think I would like to. So I can say then that I have the record for the stock bottom end 6-liter Gen 4 LS, because we made 1,543 horsepower. I know that there's a lot of racers out there running way more boost than we ran. Thing is, I don't know how much timing that they're running, and I don't know how much power they're running. I'm sure guys have made a lot more power than that. I mean, we only did that because it was the Big Bang thing, and it was kind of a gee whiz deal. I didn't do it to set a world record. Keiko 289 heads, they're still junk compared to a GT40P or a GT40P or the standard GT40 head. I think a Keiko 289 head flows about what an E7TE head does. '65C10, small book Chevy 350, Speed Pro, Flowtech heads. 650 is fine for that. You didn't tell me what the camshaft is unless you have a really, really big cam, unless you have a 248, 242, 248 camshaft in there. Even still, a 650 is probably enough. You're trashing him, but never saw a video. If that's directed at me, I have seen the video. I watched the whole thing. I know the guy that did the video, and it's good stuff. I like seeing guys turbocharge stuff. My understanding is I just don't know what is the official record and how do people establish that. I've had people call me and say, I just set the record for the fastest, 89 turbo probe automatic. And I'm like, well, what is that record? Like, where's the listing for all the record books for all of these things? I want to see what that is. FYI, the intake and exhaust are on the same side. Yes, we're familiar with the heads. Even a Windsor World Junior head, a Windsor Junior head is better than the 289. It's a lot better than a 289, although it's not fantastic. It is better. An AFR head is a lot better. Yep. Could make good power with a Jeep. I don't think I could. I've never even run one. I don't even know that I've ever even seen one on the chassis dyno at Westech. I don't think they've ever run one on the engine dyno. And it seems like from the rated power outputs that you're not starting out with very much power. Richard, you're probably going to break the record when you do a big bang with the E85 and an S480 on a Jeep 4-liter. I don't know. Those guys seem to know what they're doing. They put together a dedicated motor. I mean, I watched the whole thing, and they spent some time on it. It has a dedicated intake manifold, and they did a nice exhaust manifold on it, and they have it has a good intercooler and stuff. So they turned it up. I just don't know how. I'm not sure how far those things, how much RPM those things are willing to run. I don't know how good the head is that they can get on that. Does anybody know what the flow rate is on a 4-liter Jeep head? I would think that would be more like a 292 Chevy than it is like the 4200. I mean, the 4200 should be able to make a lot because it makes a lot more. It has a lot more cylinder head. My stroke Jeep is 350 wheel horsepower, 405 foot-pounds. See, that tells me that when we have a lot more torque than we have horsepower, it tells me that thing doesn't. It's either missing head flow or it's missing cam timing. And because if we have more torque than horsepower, we have essentially a mild combination. It's like having a stroker where we have a bunch more torque than we have horsepower. You can get the thing to RPM like they did with putting that intake manifold on there. I can't remember how much camshaft they said that they had in that. There's the guy running 9s with a Ford Probe with a 289. Edelbrock makes a head for the 4-liter. So does anybody know, Tim, do you know what a Jeep head flows? I mean, I could go on to what's his name's head flow deal, but I think it's possible to run an induct intercooler with an LSA blower without creating restriction. I think you would be better off just running E85 in it. Well, that's a good tip. Cheap block substitute for a textured block is from a front-wheel drive Lincoln Continental. It's an aluminum block, but it's a Windsor aluminum block. I'll get my cam stats. Okay, let me know what that is. I'm guessing, I'm going to guess if it's making that kind of torque and it's a stroker, I'm going to say that it's a 218, 224. Love your help with the community. Thank you. What's the plan for the 240Z? I would like to put the 2J in it. I mean, not the 2J, the RB25 in it. It would be awesome. I was originally going to put an LS in it, and I was originally going to put an LS in the 5-liter, but that's just so, like, you know, that's so 5 minutes ago. My wife sending me a message. Let's see. Cletus got upset because I said Leroy ain't a Corvette anymore. Stop claiming the Corvette record. Wow. A Jeep 4-liter Big Bang. I actually do want to do a Jeep. I don't want to try to set a record or necessarily even do a Big Bang. I just like that it's another inline 4-cylinder like the others. Again, I don't think it's going to be like, I think that the Atlas is more like the Barra and the 2J, whereas I think that the Jeep might be an intermediate thing between like the early Chevy and the Slant 6. A Jeep 4-liter Big Bang would be cool unless it fails at 500 horsepower. That would be bad. Horsepower monster built a 4-liter. Yeah, I've seen that. Yes, the RB20. I don't have an RB26. I have an RB25. What's the best intake for boost on an LS3? L76 with 021 heads. Goal is 1,000 wheel horsepower with a single turbo. Use an LS3 intake, or if you don't have that and you have the truck version of that, the LY6, L76, L98 kind of thing, use that intake. That intake makes the same power as an LS3. It just doesn't fit in a lot of places because it's taller. But the LS3 would be the best for, especially if it's a stock displacement. And 1,000 wheel horsepower is easy with an LS3 and a cam and springs and then boost. That's going to be really easy because you're going to be at, with a cam and an LS3, you're going to be at 560 or so, even as much as 570 or so flywheel horsepower. So adding boost to that is nothing. Yes, Barrow the Fox. I do want to do that. It should be easy to make the name change, right? I drive a stock probe. 0 to 60 is like forever. 0 to 60 in forever. The probe turbos were fast, though. Jeep 4-liter has more in common with the 1960s than the 2000s. Just old tech and struggles make power and compared to more modern stuff. What is somebody tell me what the Jeep 4-liter is rated at? What's the stock power output? 210, 140. Okay. That's actually not bad. Two tens, that's serious power. Any teaser update on how the 38 Big Bang is coming? I think we figured out that we can run the Holly on it, maybe. Electric swap the Fox. But I would, but then I have to put a Kenny Bell booster pump on it. I also like the Mazda 626 turbos. I broke the 66 Tornado 425 old smoky burnout record. Nice. I hope by a lot. Which block can take more power, aluminum or iron, or is it an internet myth? If you look at the L33 versus the LM7 blocks on a 5.3, I don't think the block isn't going to be the limiting thing when you test the other stuff. You're going to break a rod normally is the first thing, or a piston, and then the block will be the last thing on either one of those. I don't think you'll have a problem with some of the aluminum blocks like the LS1, LS2, or LS3. I think that there's less power potential there. Jeep 4-liter Big Bang. Well, I guess now that somebody officially has the 4-liter Jeep record, I guess we have to shoot for that, right? I know nothing about Jeeps. 205, 213. So I was even a little, I even overestimated a little bit. Comp Extreme 4x4. That's probably a good cam for what you're doing, though. Did you get a test done on the 360 Magnum yet? I haven't been back down there yet. Mazda Speed 6, those were cool. Dodge, to avoid at all costs. Look it up in the dictionary. Nice. Shots fired at Dodge. GT45 on a Jeep 4-liter, that would work. Did anybody tell me what a 4-liter Jeep is rated at? Flexall, what's a stock 4-liter Jeep rated at? 2-valve heads on a 4-valve aluminum block out of Lincoln Aviator. I think it has flat top pistons. What compression would it be? I don't know. I'd have to go look and see what the chamber size is, and you'd have to, if you want to know, Jason, go to Wallace Racing Compression Calculator. Do a search for Wallace Racing Compression Calculator, and it will answer any compression ratio that you want to put in there. Any interest in European V8s? I do like them, but if I'm going to do a European one, I'd like to continue with the inline 6-cylinder stuff. I'd actually like to do a BMW, like the N54, I think is what it is. A 2004-liter HO is rated 195 horsepower. That's actually fairly stout. Because that's, 4-liter. That's actually fairly good. I mean, it's not 4-liter Barra good or 4.2-liter Atlas good, but it's pretty good. It's a lot better than a slant 6 or a 292 Chevy. Yeah, the aluminum LS1, LS2, and LS3, the sleeves I think are a lot thinner than the other stuff. JVV, what are you doing? You're just throwing money out. I've got plenty of stuff for a big Jeep, Big Bang. What are guys getting out of porting those heads, Flexall? Are guys? I know that they did that in that thing. What I didn't see numbers on what the heads float or anything, and how much camshaft. Honestly, the one saving grace, or the one thing I can say that I did get out of watching the new Fast and the Furious movie, is I really do like the new Toyota Supras. I like the way that they look. I know that it's a BMW motor, but it's an inline 6, and it certainly can make power. And so I'd like to have one of those, but obviously I'm not going to. But I like the way they look. I think that they're cool. So I would like to do a BMW 6-cylinder turbo test. I think a Big Bang N54, is that what it is, would kind of be interesting. Kung Fu Fighting W8 VW engine, nice. But I do like the other V8s. Like I like these are Japanese though. Obviously the Toyota and the Nissan ones are cool. Who keeps messaging me? Let's see. The 4-liter is absolutely done past 4,500 in stock form, 5,500 RPM red line. I've seen them turn 7,000 a limiter rock climbing, but who cares when you're bouncing off rocks and dirt? And see, that's a lot of times that's the struggle. If you get a motor that makes peak power at 5,500, then it's going to make more torque than horsepower, which is not what we want when we're doing Big Bang stuff. So if we can get those with a short runner intake and more camshaft and head flow, obviously is a big benefit. But if they have 200 CFM and we can get that up to, let's say we get up to 250 or something, then you can make some reasonable power NA and hopefully get it to make peak power at 6,000 or 62 or 6,300 or something, and then add boost to that and have a rising curve. That would be helpful. So you put LS valves in it. My head is fully ported, but I don't have flow figures. Giant LS valves and springs. It flows more than enough to make good power. Obviously, it does. They took the W8 and built the W16 and the Bugatti because that's twice as good. 300 foot-pounds at 900 RPM. That's pretty stout. Revs to 6,500. Nice. Did you run it on the chassis dyno? Is that where you're getting those numbers from? There's one dude selling ported 0331 Jeep 4-liter with 202.16 valves. Flow 245. Nice. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If we could get something that's near 250, that would be good. 3.2-liter VR6 from VW. They love turbos. Every motor loves turbos. How does length and the number of bends and tube between the turbo and the intercooler affect performance? Take a look at the test that I did where we made the tubing lots bigger and lots longer and see what it did. I specialize in BMW tuning. I'd be willing to send you a built Euro version S50 and tune it with you via remote. We don't do, when we run it on the dyno, we run a standalone. I wouldn't run it with a factory ECU. We would run it with a Holly or something. I don't know if you know what if the crank and the cam trigger patterns are. The only thing is we run into the same problem, which is why this would be problematic, is because the motor that I want to run is a Vanos motor, so we'd have to be able to control the cam timing. .900 RPM on a chassis down. Nice. I'm assuming that that's a stick car then. The 4-liter cam specs are 166, 190, a 50. Real stout. No wonder they respond so well. At what RPM do you typically start your rising boost curve? Is it to avoid detonation? We would do that on a big bang motor because we don't want a big torque number, because that's normally what breaks a rod. .289 head supporting upgraded stud for roll rockers and big 202 valves. Oh, so if you have a 289 heads and they're fully ported and stuff, those might do better than a GT40 head. Boosted B2200, that's a good idea. .3.2 Mercedes with a turbo. I'd like to find one of the Mercedes compressor motors in their junkyard and put a turbo on that. 107.5 LSA stock. That seems pretty tight. Linked Thunder ECU. I'm not familiar with that. We have a Megasquirt. The Megasquirt we know will control the 4200, so it should control the BMW, I would think. What's your opinion on the Street Outlaws guys starting to dominate with crank-driven Prochargers, rising boost curve? Well, and that's the thing, and we talked about that when we were looking at the boost curves of the different deals, that there may be a situation where you can't put all of the power down that a turbo is going to give you over a centrifugal blower. So in that case, you're having to take the power away. So you're having to manage that. If it's not there, it's easier to manage. And so the rising curve of a centrifugal might be beneficial on a traction-limited drag race application. I have seen the Newcomer Racing 4-liter Jeep Turbo video. I'll have to, Flex, I'll have to take a look at that and see. The M104 can make 1,000 horsepower. When you use new lifters on a used flat tablet cam, do you need to remove the inner springs? We don't do that. 1/8 mile, they build boost faster. Not on a centrifugal. Okay, Victor, I will. Just send me, here's my email. So send me something over. And just tell me where you are and stuff. And we'll see if it's logistically possible. Have you ever done the comparison of a centrifugal versus turbo versus Whipple? Yes, Paul, come on. Go watch all the videos. That video is up. A centrifugal has a rising curve. The twin screw, which we use a Kenny Bell, but it would be the same thing with the Whipple, has a slight rising curve, although it starts out much higher than the centrifugal does. Then a roots blower has a slightly better response there, depending on how we pulley it. And then a turbo has the most average and peak power. Have you ever run a 54-458 cam? I don't know if I have or not. We don't remove the inner springs, and I will reuse I will mix and match used cams and new lifters and new cams and old lifters and all of that stuff. Because when we're running stuff on the dyno, and it's not going to fail on the dyno, not usually. A 4-liter Mustang engine. The superchargers have very good throttle response. A centrifugal has a rising curve. So if you hit the throttle at 2,500 RPM, it's going to have about 2 or 3 pounds of boost. And then it's not going to have peak boost until you're at the peak RPM, because they have a rising boost curve. They all do that. The only way to change that is if you speed the blower up a lot, and instead of 10 pounds up here and 2 pounds down here, you now have 20 pounds up here, and then you're going to start with more down here. But it's still going to rise. It's going to go from 10 to 20 instead of 2 to 10. So they always rise like that. I thought they made a Whipple for an older 289-302. How can I find one? I don't know about like an older carbureted one or the 5-liter. Motors and engines are interchangeable. Just ask the Ford engine company. Let's see. 2 more minutes. Force induction 5.3. How much gap should I use? We run 28 thousandths to 30 thousandths. Modded 4.2 Jeep can reach similar to stock 2-barrel 289 horsepower and torque from a 65 to 67. .7-liter V6. Looks like your viewers are interested in high RPM builds. There's probably several that are. A Falcon 4-liter Intech single overhead cam is an inline 6. That size meaning for the Jeep 4-liter versus the Ford Intech single overhead cams for 4-liter. If I do an inline Ford, it's going to be the 4.9 liter. So if I'm going to do a Jeep, should I do the 4.2 or the 4-liter? Nope, if it runs 9,200, we can't run it. That's too high. I saw Steve Morris say you can run solid. What about General Engines? Does General Engines never call them motors either? I saw Steve Morris say you can run solid lifters with a hydraulic cam. Yes, you can. You can do it the other way around too. It's just that the ramp rate on the cam is optimized for the lifter that you're going to use. A burn stainless design? Yeah, that'd be funny if you thought that I could afford a burn stainless header. An off-the-shelf header versus a custom header set. But if you did a custom header set, it would have to be for that particular application. Six-liter LS Gen 3, best supercharger for the street. You just have to tell me what kind of power curve you want. And you could look at all of the videos that I have up. Centrifugal has a rising curve. The Roots and the twin screw have a immediate boost response that most people associate with blowers. So for a truck, I kind of like those better because they're going to give you more torque. Do a 4-liter with cranking rods from a 4.2. I can't do that. It has to be the factory stuff. The heads would be more, yeah, Tim. The heads would be more my interest. We want to make a combination of the best NA power that we can at the highest engine speed that we can. Somebody told me about David Visor doing the steam injection or whatever. I'll have to take a look at that. It's not 9,200 is not too much. We don't care. We don't care how much RPM it is. Uh-oh. I only use chassis dynos, a Mustang, the proper one, because we know that there's only one good kind of dyno, right? You have to watch out for camshaft harmonics. We're running into we're not running into. I was told that there's a harmonics problem with the 4200 as well, and so I'm going to try to talk to a couple of people about that. I don't think a 4.2 Jeep versus a 4.2 Atlas motor is going to be much, and the 4-liter Barra. I don't think it's going to be much of a comparison. I don't think that the Jeep can compete with either one of those. An 03 Cobra motor, take a look at what we did. Take a look at all of we've run turbos on them. We've run blowers on them. Novies. A Novi 1200 is not bad, but a 2000 or a 2200 obviously would be even better. Because the motor is capable of going to 1,000 horsepower, so you need a 1,000 horsepower blower. A fully balanced 4-liter with a 6125 rod has no harmonic issues. But I can't do a modified one unless I was going for the record. I want to do the stock bottom end, and what we want to do is port the head, put a cam in it, put some kind of intake manifold on it, and then turn the boost up and see what happens. If we're going to do a big bang, if we're going to do a dedicated build, then that would be something else. The Jeep is rated at like 100 horsepower less than the Atlas is, so I'm not sure how it will compete. I know, Victor, whatever dyno you have is the best one. That's what everybody says. Everybody that's out there dyno testing, whatever dyno they have is the only one that's good and the only one that gives true power and the only one that's accurate, and it's the best one ever made. I've been doing this a long time, and I hear that all the time from people. That's not accurate. The Atlas is 291 horsepower. The 06 and up stuff is 291. And yeah, that's what I mean. I think the Jeep is, that's what I said. I think that the Atlas and the Barra and the 2J are kind of off by themselves, at least in terms of rated power output. And I think that the 292 and the Slant 6 are kind of over here. And the Jeep might be kind of in the middle, which is an interesting place to be. It's better than the others. So if we compared it to these other ones, it's going to look a lot better. I don't know that we need to compare it to overhead cam motors, because that's a different kind of technology. 4-valve motors we would expect them to do better. The Jeep will make a big mess in the dyno room. And the thing about dynos is that it doesn't matter what number you're getting. The number isn't, you're not looking at that. You're not looking at that as an absolute. If you run a test on a Superflow or a DynoJet or anything else, Land and Sea, I don't care if it's a Stutzka, I don't care what it is. If you run a number and that number is, you're testing something and it's repeatable and it does the same thing, you run after run after run, and when you don't make any changes, that's accurate. And then when you make a change, if the power changes, then you go, okay, it did this. It doesn't matter that number might be slightly different than somebody else got from somewhere else, because you should never be comparing numbers from this dyno to numbers on that dyno and then comparing differences. That's just foolish. That's why when I run tests, I like to run them all on the same day, same airfield, same timing, yada, 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 do all that stuff. But I could care less what my numbers are compared to somebody's numbers on the East Coast or in Canada or Brazil or Europe. That doesn't make any difference. One of those isn't more accurate than all of the others, because I'm only looking for a delta. If I change the exhaust and I see a change, then at the very least we can say, hey, look, when we did this change, it will do this. It will make this kind of change. And that's kind of what I'm looking for when I do testing. And like I said, the thing with the dynos is the same thing as with everything else. Chevys are only good, or Fords are only good, or Coyotes or LSs, or whatever the thing is the person has. That's the thing to them that has to be better than everybody else's. And everybody else's is bad, because if I say something bad about somebody else, then by extension, I look better. That's not the way to be, man. That's not, that doesn't make any difference. There's not just one good kind of engine. There's not just one good camshaft. There's not one good kind of forced induction. There's not just one good kind of dyno. There's lots and lots of good stuff out there. Tim, the next project should be putting a Jeep 4-liter in a Miata. Why don't you put a V10 in there then? Or a V12? Next time you talk to Tom Nelson, ask him what happened to that 4-cam Chevy-based overhead cam engine he was designing. I'll have to ask him about that. I haven't heard anything about that. The dyno is just a tool, just like when we airflow test. When I run airflow tests on a head, I don't compare those airflow numbers to somebody else's airflow numbers across the country. I don't compare them to airflow numbers that I ran 5 years ago on the same airflow bench, because that's why I like to test back to back. So at least I know that, and when I do that, we can do an ABA test. So I know that there's no change in the airflow. And sometimes we do that. When I get weird numbers on the flow bench, I retest it and go, I don't think it should do that. What the heck is going on? And then I'll retest it. And again, I don't care about what somebody else's numbers are. I'm looking at a difference. Did we port this? Did we put a big valve in it? What did we do? So that I know that, and I'm usually trying to relate that to something else. If I do a 706 versus a 799 or a 317 head, here are the flow numbers I got. We got some kind of difference. And then we put them on the dyno, we got some kind of difference. That way we can correlate those. But the numbers I got, if somebody else from on the other side of the country wants to argue with me about flow numbers, I just don't get involved. A 2-liter V10? That's going to be really tiny. A 4.2-liter Land Cruiser. That's going to be a Toyota, though, right? What size turbo? This will be the last question. What size turbo do you suggest for a 496 700 horsepower 10-to-1 2 turbos? Even are you only trying to make 700, or is that what the motor makes now? If that's what the motor makes now, I need to know how much power. I need to know how much power you want to make. So do you want to go from 700 to 1500 or 2000? Then to S475s kind of thing. If you're just trying to make 700, you're probably almost all the way there with a 496 already. Are there any previous videos or dyno sessions with an FE platform? I don't have any. I've done testing with them, and I was looking for all the photos, but I can't find them. I did some stuff with Robert Pond on a motor that he did stack injection on a stroker FE for a Cobra, and I can't find all the, I have all the dyno data, but I don't have any of the photos and stuff, so I need to find that. I'll take a look for it, or vice versa. I have one and not the other, so I'm not able to do that. Unfortunately, I do want to do some more FE stuff. I'd actually like to build one because I've never built one. I've only done some wrenching on them on the dyno when they were already being run by somebody that understands them a lot better than I did. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Thanks for showing up, guys. I will see you all tomorrow, and I'm working on my video on the 03 Cobra, so I'll get going.